U.S. President Joe Biden has called on all American citizens remaining in Ukraine to leave the country immediately due to increased threats of Russian military action. Mr. Biden said he would not send troops to rescue Americans if Moscow invades Ukraine. He warned that things could go crazy quickly in the region. Russia has repeatedly denied any plans to invade Ukraine despite massing more than 100,000 troops at the border. But it has just begun massive military drills with neighboring Belarus, and Ukraine has accused Russia of blocking its access to the sea. The Kremlin says it wants to enforce red lines to make sure that its former Soviet neighbor does not join NATO. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Thursday that Europe faced its biggest security crisis in decades amid the tensions. The U.S. State Department urged Americans in Ukraine to leave immediately. American citizens should leave now, Mr. Biden told NBC News. We're dealing with one of the largest armies in the world. It's a very different situation and things could go crazy quickly. Asked whether there was a scenario that could prompt him to send troops to rescue fleeing Americans, Mr. Biden replied, "There's not. That's a world war, when Americans and Russia start shooting at one another. We're in a very different world than we've ever been." World leaders, meanwhile, continued their frenzied diplomacy to defuse the current crisis over Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine announced late on Thursday that they had failed to reach any breakthrough in a day of talks with French and German officials aimed at ending the separatist conflict in eastern Ukraine. The current tensions come 8 years after Russia annexed Ukraine's southern Crimea Peninsula. Since then, Ukraine's military has been locked in a war with Russian-backed rebels in eastern areas near Russia's borders. Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he hoped strong deterrence and patient diplomacy could find a way through the crisis, but the stakes were very high. In a joint news conference in Brussels with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, Mr. Johnson said he did not believe Russia had yet taken a decision on whether to invade Ukraine, but the UK's intelligence remains grim. Asked whether the UK would consider going further in its support for Ukraine, including military support for an insurgency if Russia invades, Mr. Johnson said he would consider what more we can conceivably offer. "It's possible, I don't want to rule this out, but at the moment we think the package is the right one," he said. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said during a frosty news conference with his British counterpart Liz Truss that the talks had been disappointing. He said relations between the UK and Russia leave much to be desired, and are at the lowest point over the past few years. Ms. Truss accused Russia of Cold War rhetoric. UK Defense Secretary Ben Wallace will meet his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu in Moscow on Friday. Before the trip, Mr. Wallace confirmed that the UK was providing more defensive equipment, including body armor, helmets and combat boots, to the Ukrainian government. He also said it was important to show that NATO countries won't let threats push us around. Meanwhile, Ukraine accused Russia of blocking its access to the sea as Russia prepares for naval exercises. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said the Sea of Azov was completely blocked, and the Black Sea almost fully cut off by Russian forces. Russia's naval exercises were due to take place next week in the two seas to the south of Ukraine, the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. However, Ukraine's border guard service said on Friday that Russia had told them it had cancelled its drill in the Sea of Azov, an internal sea bordered by both Russia and Ukraine. 2 areas of the Black Sea will still be closed off for 6 days from Sunday. Russian naval drills were already taking place in Crimea on Friday. U.S. President Joe Biden has called on all American citizens remaining in